All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Maddie's Fun Community Conversations, August 12th, Spotlight on Behavior. And I am one of your co-hosts, Christina Lee. I am the founder and principal at Fellow Pharma Strategies. And I'm joined by Shonyae Johnson, our other co-host and panelist today, Director of Virtual Behavior at Humane Rescue Alliance. So we're so excited to have you guys here today. Behavior is very close to our hearts, and it's so relevant in the animal welfare world. And I just asked the question of the day, but we have 4 panelists today, 4 behavior experts with experience in a variety of different areas of behavior and the shelter world. So we're very excited to have them here. But the question of the day is, how have you recruited volunteers to help with your behavior program or just animal behavior in general if you do not have an official program at your organization? Shonyae mentioned playgroups and cat behavior programs.
Yeah, doing cat training and clicker training was really fun. I think sometimes cat volunteers can feel left out of the behavior work when they see playgroups going on. So having a behavior training program with the cats was really fun and exciting. Yeah. And our chat has pack walks. So that's a fun one, like pack walks, runs, and strolls, as well as a pet food bank since they don't have a behavior program. So I think that's pretty awesome. More cat training programs, which is great. And someone else mentioned enrichment, which I think every shelter can do enrichment. So that's great. All right. Keep those answers coming into the chat. I'm really excited to see how y'all are utilizing your volunteers. And we will move on to our national updates. So we want to maximize the time that we have with our Q&A session. But if you do have a national update to share, now is the time. Feel free to unmute and share your updates with the group. Please keep your update to under 1 minute to make time for the rest of today's program. And again, you can share them directly into the chat. If it is your first time here, or if you happen to run late like me sometimes and miss this portion for national updates, anything that you have going on at your organization that other people can attend or that you have coming up, feel free to let us know about it. Thank you, Allison and Amber. We have some free resources in the chat. And don't forget to sign up for y'all's cash giveaway to enter to win. We had some great winners announced last week. Okay, we also want to let you all know about Maddie's Monthly Behavior Connection. You can join the Maddie's Monthly Behavior Connection led by board-certified veterinary behaviorist Dr. Sheila Sagerson on the 4th Thursday of every month at 12 p.m. Pacific time for a monthly webcast about dog and cat behavior while supporting pets in our community and animal shelters. So Allison has posted that link in the chat. Feel free to sign up and you'll get those reminders about when that is happening. The next webcast will be on August 22nd and is on managing canine arousal behaviors in the shelter setting with Fernando Diaz from San Diego Humane Society. I've actually gone to some of his talks before, and Fernando Diaz is great. So I do recommend that y'all all attend that as well.
Thank you, Shonyae. All right, so then we will get started with introducing our panelists. And we will be introducing them by alphabetical order. So first off, we have Kayla Wade, who is the Assistant Shelter Operations Manager at the Humane Society of Charlotte. Kayla, if you can just do a brief intro, that would be amazing.
Hi, thanks for being here, everybody. I'm super excited. Love talking about all things behavior, so I'm super jazzed to be here. Like you mentioned, my name is Kayla Wade. I work at the Humane Society of Charlotte, which is located in North Carolina. I've been there for almost 4 years from now, and primarily I work on the internal part of the shelter. So I help work with the animals that are exhibiting behavior concerns, trying to work into the program to see how we can kind of mitigate those issues that they're having. So that's primarily what my duties consist of. But in the past, I have done public training as well in terms of group classes and private lessons. But primarily now I'm just on the inside working with the shelter dogs and cats there. That's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla. Next, we have Maria DeLeon, dog behavior consultant at Smart Hund. Maria.
Hello. Yes, my name is Maria, located in New Jersey, which apparently is a very hot place today. Hello to other New Jerseyans. I've been in this field for 15 years as a certified dog behavior consultant with IAABC, and I've held many hats within it. But I would say my main thread that keeps me going is I'm just fascinated with increasing safe interactions between dogs and people, and also assessing where those things go wrong so we can move forward and improve upon those things. So that has been true for me as a private dog trainer, consultant for shelters, rescues, managing behavior departments for national organizations, and even working dog organizations. So yeah, that's me.
So cool. Thank you. Next, we have Raphael Fontaine, owner and trainer of Rapstar Canine and former instructor with Dogs Playing for Life. Raphael.
Yeah, so I'm Rafael Fontaine. I've been in the industry for I dipped my toes in it about 18 years ago. And just through meeting the right people and getting connected along the way, I kind of fell into the DPFL. Um, I don't know, I drank their Kool-Aid and I loved it. So I traveled with them for about 3.5 years. And at this point, I am staying local. I do have a family. I have a 3-year-old son I like to be around. So traveling got a little tough. So I stay local. I offer behavioral support for shelters and private rescues. I do everything from weekly playgroup support, showing up in just running group if they don't have the people to facilitate it. And then I also do retention support. So retention programming for some of the local rescues. They host me. I work with some of their dogs, and then they schedule the public to come in if those people are on the list to surrender their dogs. And so with one of my programs, we've had about a 93% save rate. For the people that were willing to come in and work with me and put in the time, 93% of them removed their dogs from the surrender list and kept them. So my personal goal, I do enjoy private training, but I really love the shelter stuff. My personal goal is just to keep as many dogs out of shelters as possible, and then to enrich the lives of the ones that are in shelters. I can't offer as much insight on the cat stuff. I do have a cat. I love my cat, but I don't know as much there. My specialty is the dog-to-dog stuff, social skill building, reactivity, and playgroups.
Awesome. Raphael, where are you located?
Oh, I probably should have said that. I'm in Lakeland, Florida.
Awesome. Thank you. And you don't have to worry about not having the cat knowledge because last but not least, we have Shonyae. Shonyae Johnson, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Not at all. My name is Shonyae Johnson. I am currently the Director of Virtual Behavior Programming at Humane Rescue Alliance, which is based over on the East Coast, in the DC area. I currently reside in Texas. I've been in sheltering for 15-ish or so years, starting as a volunteer and working my way into other positions like coordinators and behavior managers and, et cetera. I love all things spicy cat and dog. I like to get into shelters and understand exactly what's happening. I like to say that animals aren't giving you a hard time, they are having a hard time. I am a certified trainer. I do, training on the side as well, but my heart will always be in building shelter programs. So being able to give shelters self-sustainable programs that they can run with their staff and volunteers to accommodate the animals in their care. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shonyae. And Shonyae is the one that brought all these amazing panelists together and put in most of the work to prepare for this community conversation today. So thank you so much, Shonyae, for that. We're excited to have all of you here. And as was mentioned earlier, please feel free to put in any questions that you might have for our panelists into the chat. We will be keeping an eye on those and asking those as the session goes on. We do have some questions that we have predetermined that we thought would be helpful for the listeners to today's conversation. So speaking of which, I will be starting with today's first question. As many of you know, and I think it's becoming more well-known in the animal sheltering field right now, behavior is just one facet of an animal's well-being. And many organizations have challenges communicating between behavior and other departments, such as medical, adoptions. And I would love to know how you have ensured clear communication between departments and what tips you have for people who might be experiencing something similar. So I would like to kick this off to Shonyae first, if you don't mind.
Not at all. So working in a shelter where there are many silos operating individually, behavior usually touches all of those individual silos. Like you said, Christina, we're seeing medical, we're seeing volunteers, we're seeing animal care operations. And the thing that I found to be most effective is utilizing your shelter management program and making sure that as many people as possible have access to that program. Using common language that everyone can understand. Behavior jargon can be very confusing for individuals. So you want to have objective language that is easy to understand, and you want it documented in that animal's profile to where it can be accessed at any point. With individuals that don't have access to things like shelter management systems, just because sometimes it's based off of by each user, things like walk boards where it's a big visual where you can see the information such as that animal's ID number, if it goes to playgroup, what type of play style does it have, if it is getting enrichment, does it need harder toys, softer toys. Having a common place where that language can be implemented is important. And lastly, I think making sure that there is a person that is responsible for auditing that information, making sure that it's in at the end of the day is really important. I always say if it's not documented, it never happened. So making sure that we're documenting it in a place where it can be seen is going to be the most important.
Can I chime in on that as well? Awesome.
Absolutely.
I think Shonyae, I think you hit it right on the head with the building or creating a language that is understood by all departments. One of the things that I strive for going into shelters is any abbreviations I use or breakdown on language I use in group is similar to what I use out of group. And I make sure that everybody has a copy with that of that emailed to them so that when they start to see my notes rolling in, they have an idea of what I mean. But also for me, just going in as an outsider to contract with shelters, I work really hard to work with each individual department just to build a relationship. And then I'm able to pull them all together. So even when I'm not there, they continue the communication. The walk boards have been huge. Like I said, or like you said, if it's not noted, it didn't happen. And nowadays, with some of the concerning things I see, if notes haven't been in, it's really hard to justify decisions that are made. So communication for all departments to be able to connect with is so important.
100%, I definitely agree that it's one of the most important aspects of training.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And along those lines, we are working as behavior specialists and professionals with a really diverse team, staff, volunteers, all different backgrounds. And all these people are expected to work with the same animals. So how do you ensure consistency in handling techniques when it comes to working with a variety of human beings with the same animal population?
I'm happy. Oh, okay, I was going to say, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll
Can I
say,
jump
Maria,
in on
would you
this
like to? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I think one of the really important things I've noticed in sheltering, and because of often the chronic understaffing problem that kind of happens across the board, is that onboarding is often overlooked. And I've seen firsthand the importance of standardized onboarding for all staff, where behavior is immediately thrown in there, highlighted as an important part of the training necessary for everybody. And the organization I came with, they even wouldn't have people handle, maybe for a little bit excessive amount of time. I think it was about 5 weeks. But by the time they had hands on the animals, they had shadowed other staff members. They had gotten a lot of training. They've all gotten the same training. So nobody can claim to have not been introduced to something or know certain terminology, et cetera, or even where to find defensive handling equipment, which is important. So definitely, I would love to see more structured onboarding programs for orgs across the board. I just saw how effective that was and how often it's missed. Again, mostly because of resources, but I just think I've seen how important it is.
I think that was great. And I agree with all that. I think I also, when I think of maintaining consistency, I think of leading by example. So I think it's really easy to kind of do a one-off training and put someone in front of a webinar and be like, okay, you know something about behavior now, like go off and do the things. And I think hands-on training is a really, really good way to learn all the things you need to know in the most efficient way possible. And so I think if you are trying to maintain and make sure that everyone is, handling animals the fear-free way or the way that you'd like, you have to be the one to show that. You can't necessarily just kind of put them off to the side and say, okay, you go and figure it out now. You have to consistently show that. And it takes a lot of maintenance. It's not just say, first 90 days, you'll shadow with this team, and then you can kind of, you know everything you need to know now. It's a consistent thing that you have to keep up with your staff members. And so whether you have to put that on your calendar and say, okay, once a week, I'm going to make sure that everyone goes through playgroup or everyone goes through dog walking training or whatever that may be for your organization, you have to maintain that and make sure that everyone is up to speed with everything. And things change. Sometimes your techniques change and sometimes things differ in terms of how you want to handle animals. So in order for everyone to keep up with those and keep up to date, you have to be the one to kind of lead that pathway a bit.
Perfect.
Raphael, did you want to say something?
I don't think I could say it as eloquently as they both did. So that was right on point. I agree.
Shelly asks a good question in the chat. Do you recommend monthly or quarterly refreshers for training or a different frequency? And I'm assuming training of the humans.
And I'll chime in for this one. I think the more, in my opinion, if you have the ability, the more frequently, the better. Just because as humans, we get, I catch myself at times, we get comfortable with doing kind of the same thing. And then we kind of think we can backslide just a bit. And, working with animals, we can be humbled very quickly. So I think keeping each other in check and being able to consistently work together while also kind of testing each other and pushing each other, it can't hurt all around.
I'll also chime in from the organization I recently came from. I tried to do certain presentations at least quarterly, the ones that we found most helpful and most effective. I think this is probably true across the board that daily care staff had a higher turnover than other roles, and they also have the most on-hands time with the animals. So we wanted to make sure that at minimum quarterly, we're all receiving the same presentation. Some of my presentations were down to, they were like word for word script, so that again, everybody was getting the same really important bullet points. You can't overtrain anybody or an animal. So we just wanted to repeat the same message over and over again, and also make sure anybody that had just come in got that information within a timely fashion.
Thank you. So many good questions, so little time. All right, so I guess the next question that I will jump into is we talked about being under-resourced in the shelter world. We're all familiar with that. So something that is hard to measure, but it's really important to, is the success of your behavior programs. How do we know that we are doing all we can, and how do we know that we're doing it well, and how to make adjustments that we need to? So love to know your experience in measuring the success of your behavior programs and making adjustments when necessary. Kayla, I'd like to put you on the spot for this one.
Sounds good. I'm ready. So yeah, I think this is a very hard question. And when I kind of peeked at the questions that we're going to talk about, this one definitely caused the most emotion for me, because it can be a lot of pressure to have to feel like you have to put out a product when it comes to behavior. It's not always the most quantitative type of department. It's not always easiest to show exactly the impact you're having in terms of numbers. And so I think if you put a lot of pressure to have some sort of output like that, you might find yourself struggling a lot with that. So it might be more helpful to look more at stories and kind of showcasing your behavior program in that sense. Because if you think about what your goal is, it's your goal is to reduce the number of animals coming in the shelter, or it's to increase pet retention. If you're having difficulty finding a way to, pull a report from that with your, whatever software you're using, if you can just show a success story and show the impact you're having in that form, I think that's a great way to show the success of your department without feeling like you have to, compete with other departments in terms of how you can show it in terms of, a number stance, or even like a monetary stance too, because often our behavior programs don't have a financial component to it. They don't have that. They're providing, funding for the organization. Sometimes it is just, they're providing a resource. And so if you can showcase your best results in terms of those stories and how you've helped, I think that might help relieve a lot of pressure for yourself and your teammates and your staff members. And it can show the impact that you have in a greater way.
Thank you for that. Shonyae.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that. And I think Kayla definitely made a great point about utilizing your stories, or sometimes we'll call them, like case studies that we've had that have been successful. While you're going through these process, I think documenting your case studies is so important because it really does highlight the quantitative work that you do, right? Like it highlights the quality of the work that you're producing. On the other side of that coin, working with shelters that do need data for, donor investment, or shelters that do need data in order to provide that funding or those resources. What I can give the best advice for shelters is to figure out what it is that you want to figure out what it is that you actually need a number for, and don't try to necessarily see that number is gonna double or triple, but I'm always for, are you seeing progress? Like, a little progress is better than no progress at all. So if you're able to expand your volunteer program to have more dogs coming out to playgroup that are successful in playgroup, that are coming out and getting out every day, you're able to see that you are impacting them in that way as well. And then you might see those numbers line up. Okay, like more dogs did come out to playgroup and they spent more time out in the yard. Now we're seeing less, reactivity in our kennels. Now we're seeing things like that. So on both sides, capture those stories, capture those successes, and also make sure that if you are doing those things, you are keeping an eye on, the data, so that if you have to provide it for donors or submit it for a grant, that you have that in your back pocket as well.
Thank you so much. So some of the questions that are coming in, a lot of them are about like what kind of trainings, like what kind of continuing education programs. I just want to address that piece, that theme. And a lot of us in the shelter world don't have the resources to send people to conferences or anything like that. So and one of the questions that, let's see, Shonyae, I forgot who asked, I think this one, Sarah asked, was how can we encourage city employees to get professional development? And she said that it's available, but not taken advantage of. So I was thinking, Kayla, if you had any thoughts on, actually, I don't know if your shelter, is it private or public, but any thoughts on encouraging people to take advantage of continuing education opportunities that are out there? And if anyone else has any thoughts in the wider audience about any city shelters that have seen success in getting employees to take advantage of that training. So Kayla, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we are a private nonprofit organization, so we don't have any government contracts and things of that nature. But in terms of continuing education that is accessible for your staff members, if you can't send them to conferences and things of that nature, I think for me, the most helpful thing that I've seen is shadowing, to be honest, like shadowing within your own organization, because you might find that everyone who's there has their own life experience and has a lot of knowledge that you can learn from. And so if you can't physically go somewhere else, you could find a lot within just the people that you work with if you just have that conversation with them, if you just work with them more on a one-on-one basis. And then if you want to expand outside of that, I think networking with other organizations is also your best bet. I think if you can, provide service for service of like, hey, if I can send someone over to you for a little while, if it's like a shelter that's an hour away, something like that. So you can kind of expand, again, that hands-on experience. It can be low cost. You just have to, partner with them in the sense of like, if we can partner and have a shadow with you, you can do it with us as well. So I think the knowledge is already there within the people in your organization, possibly. You just have to find a way to extract it. And sometimes there's just as simple as, working with them closer one-on-one and talking to them and figuring out, their experience, because just because someone doesn't have necessarily a degree or a certification in behavior doesn't mean that they aren't extremely knowledgeable. So sometimes when you just kind of get to know a lot of your staff, you can find that there's a lot of continuing education that's not, officially or a course or a conference within, your 20 miles.
I love that. I love the collaboration, and especially working with other organizations too. I feel like a lot of times we are siloed within our own organization. So why not reach out to all those other places that have similar experiences? Maria, did you want to?
Yeah, just a quick add on to this is because I view everything through a behavior lens. Try to assess what the staff use as reinforcement. What priorities or what responsibilities are they given that they might want if they have additional training, like going to play groups, or I know a big one was attending conferences, which I understand there's funding complications with that, but we would allow staff to do those from home. And that would give them a little bit of a break from the feeding and the cleaning and the noise, and give them a chance to sit quietly and take in the information in a safe, quiet, area where they're open to learning. And of course that, was very exciting for a lot of people. So if you can find ways to find what reinforces them, it's going to be different among different staff members, but if the programs themselves are not maybe for them necessarily inherently reinforcing, there are ways to make those things more attractive for sure.
Can I add to that really quickly, Christina?
Absolutely.
So I think one of the things, just reading the question that was mentioned, was the key issue being that they are attentive to watering, feeding, cleaning kennels, while the volunteers are getting to do the more, enriching and fun activities. I also think it's something that has to be top-down cultural shift change for the entire shelter. It has to be understood that behavior and enrichment is just as important as cleaning, watering, and medical. And when that mindset changes, I think it takes a lot of that feeling of guilt that I see a lot of frontline staff carry of, I have to clean, I have to, they have that guilt if they aren't able to attend to that right away. But when that culture shift changes, when you implement the programs and you see that there's less waste in the kennels and the dogs are more rested, and that usually you see those other improvement happen, I think that morale boost tends to just wipe through the organization. But I agree with everyone else of rotating them through those programs that they find to be enriching for them, not only helps boost that in a sense, but it also helps guide them to where they can kind of grow within the organization as well. So I just want to really lean into your leadership, lean into them also understanding that culture as well.
If I could chime in as quickly as possible too. I think starting with what Shonyae said, like you said, having a cultural shift and putting behavior right up there with every other piece of sheltering being a priority. But then shifting to what Kayla had said in the beginning about kind of creating like, if you don't have the funds to send staff to conferences, connecting with other local shelters, and building more of a community. And then going back to what we talked about originally, having that common language. One of the benefits I've had of working with shelters across Florida is now I've got shelters trading dogs left and right, and they all have the same notes and the same information because I've been plugged and played into various positions there. So I think instead of, like you said, instead of shelters and rescues looking at each other as silos and they're just doing their own thing, you can disagree and still learn from somebody. So you may not recognize that they have programming that you would be interested in, or maybe you would tweak something, do things a little bit differently, but being open to to getting various organizations to connect, especially at a local level. And then for the animals themselves, sometimes they just need a fresh set of eyes in a different location, and you'll see them go. So, starting with prioritizing behavior up there with medical and with the cleaning, the feeding, the watering, and then really pushing to build more local communities. And you can do it on a grander scale, but let's start here and then build from there.
Well, quick shout out to Raphael to have different shelters communicating with using the same data. That's actually incredibly impressive. So that's really awesome to hear.
Has not been easy, but I really try.
I can imagine. Yeah, you deserve those props. That's really great.
Amazing. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit into behavior assessments. As you guys all know, behavior evaluations, assessments is a hot topic a few years ago, and I believe some organizations even stopped doing assessments as a result of that. And there's a lot of discussion about how to move forward. And I'd love to ask you guys, what factors should shelter professionals take into account when choosing whether to conduct behavior assessments, which one, and how that information informs the outcome for an animal? Maria, I'd love to start with you in this question.
Oh, thank you. I love this question because I am pretty much a behavior eval convert. Definitely my tagline in life is all behavior is contextual. And so my original feeling was evals are a very specific artificial context, and you change the context, you change the behavior of the animal. Then I kind of just had to do them because that was how the program I worked with functioned. And after doing, I don't know, thousands and following those animals through their process, I really have a strong appreciation for behavior evals. And I also fully believe there's pros and cons to behavior evals. So in another part of my life, I'm on a search and rescue team, and me and my dog are trained to go out and search areas for people that are missing. And one of the ways that we do that is you can start with what's called a hasty, which would mean I would potentially run the perimeter of the area or run right down the middle, get as much information as I can quickly, and then come up with next steps, which might be, doing a much more thorough search of the area. So I started relating that, especially with the staff, as an analogy to evals. To me, those are hasties. I'm taking this set amount of things that I want to look at, running through them quickly, getting as much information as I can. Our evals were only about 15, 20 minutes. And what I'm really looking for is the behavior that stays consistent across context. So I'm looking for like very egregious behavior. And I'm looking for those outliers of behavior. So if you're looking at a graph, the animals that fall in the middle are going to be like the average pet owner for the average dog for the average pet owner. And I'm looking quickly to kind of figure out which dogs are pushing that edge of that graph so much that I can immediately kind of place them in very specific buckets of needs and further assessment. So that's how I look at evals. Those are my hasties. Where I came from, I sometimes had to do evals for a very large group of animals that came in from large scale cruelty cases. And yeah, when you have to run through 100+ animals quickly and get behavior information very quickly, those hasties actually turned out to be very helpful. Either to get a picture of the population, individuals, again, find those outliers. I'm looking for those big pieces of behavior information I need initially. And all that other assessment is going to happen anyway for the length that we have the animal. So that's my current feeling of assessments and evals I've seen. It's been very interesting to watch animals run through the program, and months later we see a behavior pop up that maybe we hadn't seen for months, and we go back to the evals and we actually did see it there, but it had been so long it maybe left our mind or whatever. So yeah, I think if you view them as a snapshot and a hasty and a part of the puzzle, they're very helpful.
If I could chime in real quick, I tend to I like the idea of the hasties because I guess I didn't really, I mean, evals in general. I always, when I think evals, I think the old school, the hand in the food bowl, the poking and the prodding, and the dogs looking at you like, "What the heck are you doing?" I tend to look at like kind of what you touched on at the very end of that, the dog's experience in the shelter as a whole, as an assessment, and when we start to see something that when we see something that peaks as abnormal, that's when a couple of the I can speak from one shelter in particular that I contract with regularly. That's when then their behavior person on site will step in and say, okay, we're gonna run. I'd assume her version of Hasties, nothing too formal or too rigid, but just to get an idea of how the animal functions in certain environments. But for me, I look at it as, for assessments, what does the dog look like in the kennel? How do they come out of the kennel? What do they look like on their way to the yard? What do we see in the yard? How do they return to kennel? And then, when we put the food down, we put the water down, do we notice anything? And if we don't, like you said, I think those are the dogs that fit that center part of the graph where it's like your normal. I wouldn't necessarily say turnkey dog ready to go and perfect, but the ones that kind of sit in a more average standpoint versus the ones where we see some significant, either they're regressing or retreating or avoiding, or the ones that are a little more forward and a little more concerning in some ways.
Can I throw something in there, Christina? Okay. I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So I think Maria and Raphael, y'all are spot on in terms of the Hasties idea. I think every shelter does it like every shelter has its own word or thing for it. What I usually look for is what I consider a checkpoint. Every single person that has an interaction with that animal matters, right? Because when we place an animal out into the world, we aren't placing them with the dog behavior specialist. We aren't placing them with an animal care technician. We are placing them with a general person who's going to have management fails and who's going to, have a barbecue with everyone over, and we're placing them out into the community. So generally when I'm working with shelters, we are looking at everything from intake, even if that dog is in a stressful situation, such as getting a medical exam, riding in a truck. And the reason why is when that pet goes out into the world, it's going to have stressful situations. So I think sometimes we get caught on ensuring that the animal doesn't experience stressful situations, or we try to refrain from it as much as possible. Just from the Lima standpoint, from the leg standpoint. However, our pets will go into stressful situations. So we do need to assess their behavior when they are in those stressful situations, because the real world is not perfect, and management fails can happen. So usually we're looking at everything from intake, how it did on its exam, how it's interacted with animal care technicians and volunteers being moved in and out of its kennel for playgroup on walks. How is it during feedings? How is it during office time, showings with individuals? So this goes back to document everything, because everything actually matters.
Oh, I want to throw one more thing in there, and I get very excited about eval. Sorry, guys. Another reason to consider adding evals to your behavior program is one thing I saw over time is it helps you understand your general community of dogs and the kind of behaviors you normally see. And then because training and resources are always expensive and limited, if you know that you're constantly seeing animals that are hitting this category of behavior concerns in the evals, you can revert more of your resources to there, knowing that your resource is a little bit more targeted for your needs. Most geographical areas do have behavior similarities among dogs, because weirdly, most dogs in an area are also slightly genetically related. But that's just something you can learn a little bit more about your surrounding community and the population that you and your staff really should kind of focus on. I don't want to say specialize because you'll see everything, but where resources might be best utilized.
Awesome. Time. I wish we had like 5 more hours, but we have like 10 minutes. So I'm just gonna ask like one quick follow-up question to this topic because it's such an important one. Behavioral assessments are like we all just heard like how beneficial they can be and then also the downsides of them. But we're also getting so much pressure from the rest of the shelter, from the rest of your organization, like place this animal in a home, get this animal out of the shelter. Behavioral assessments usually take time to conduct. You have to either wait a couple of days before you do them or 15 to 20 minutes a day. It's a lot. So how do you balance that need for thorough behavior information gathering and then the pressure to find animals' homes quickly? Shonyae, do you mind taking a first stab at this one? And then Kayla, I'd love to hear from you.
I'm sorry, I was replying to someone that asked a question in the chat. Can you repeat it one more time?
Sure. How do you balance the need for thorough behavioral information gathering with the pressure to find homes quickly for animals?
Yeah, so any shelter employee, whether you're in behavior or not, may feel that pressure, right? Of we need to place these animals quickly, especially if you are in an open intake organization with a high intake rate. My biggest thing is one, we are one person, right? With the knowledge that we have to do the best that we can. So understand that when you make these decisions, you are thinking about the community, you are thinking about your other shelter employees, and you are thinking about yourself. I'm always for the safety of the person, safety of the person, safety of the community, and then the safety of the pet, the safety of the animal. So when you're going into these decisions, just kind of keep that at the forefront of your mind that you are doing your best work, and that you have to care for yourself in order to care for others. Being able to have concrete policies in place really did help me when I was going through the struggles of placement. Being able to have policies that specifically said what we were assessing, what we were looking at, and what we were comfortable placing helped me sleep at night when we had to make difficult decisions. Like Raphael said, you want to document everything. You've tried X, you've tried Y, we cannot place it because of this, we can place it because of that. Having that information documented is one of the most important things, because I believe it helps you understand the work that you're doing, and it gives you a concrete guideline so that you aren't having to put the emotional placement of how does it feel. It's taking it more as the literal approach for your processes.
Thank you. Kayla.
Yeah, I think it's a very loaded question, and I've definitely been on both sides of the coin where I'm like, just get them out there. They're going to be better in a home anyways. The behaviors are showing here could be just shelter related, and then I've also been on the side of like, no, let's just hold them for a few months while we try to work with the reactivity little by little, chip away at that stone. And so I feel like it comes from the balancing act comes from one, knowing your community very well and knowing what they can and can't handle as well. In terms of like, okay, this is a very fearful dog, but it's very dog friendly. Like we know that our community can handle that. Or you might be like, no, we live in a super populated area where there's skyrise apartments and this animal can't walk on leash and they're having trouble or they're really reactive. And what do we do about that? So I think it comes a lot from knowing your space and your adopter base and kind of what they seem to be able to manage at the least, instead of talking about training aspects. And so I think when you want to balance that, you have to think about that as well. And then also in terms of behavior assessments, you don't have to have a standardized process. You're already assessing them the moment they come in the door. Someone has looked at that animal in some capacity. So it might just be a fact if you don't have the time to take 20 minutes to assess 10 animals that are having concerns. You can talk through your staff of like, hey, you're the one that brought this animal in from the shelter. What did they do there? You're the one that checked the animal in for their medical exam. How did they do for that? You're the one that walked the dog 3 days in a row, volunteer. How did they do for that? Instead of having to drag that animal out, get a snapshot, and not really know what's going on with them, ask the 10 people that they've interacted with before to kind of get more of a broad understanding of their behavior instead of trying to find out and just make a decision based on a very small amount of time. So I think just, again, utilizing your staff and understanding your adoption base is going to help you understand, whether it's time to kind of just push them along the program or to hold them back a little bit more.
It seems like the overarching theme that we're hearing today is really about collaboration, both within the staff and volunteers in the organization and externally, other organizations, the people in the community, and then having clear communication, again, within the staff and volunteers in the organization, but also externally, gathering all the information that you can about an animal from every source that you can. So as I want to just ask a final question for all of our panelists. As you guys know, there are organizations of varying sizes, varying resources. If there's one thing, just one thing that you think every shelter or rescue or organization that houses animals should do or can implement today, what would that one thing be? I will start with Maria and I'll roll popcorn around.
thought long and hard about this question, actually, because of course, as a behavior person, I want to do all of the behavior things immediately. But I would say if you are really starting from the ground up, that objective language and the passing of information of where it needs to go and who it needs to go to in a formal way is very important. Anybody in this talk that is on behavior staff or is just the person that is maybe relegated to be the behavior person, you know how often you're just stopped in the hallways with somebody, anybody had an interesting interaction with the dog and they want to share that with you either out of concern or etc. And that information gets lost very quickly when you're also running between 30 dogs and a bunch of other staff members, and suddenly it's not put in the database if a database even exists at the shelter. So finding some ways to pass that information. That's why I said Raphael was super impressed that not only are you able to do that within organizations, but within within local shelters with each other, like that they can share data that is objective enough that they're able to understand it. That's really impressive and just shows a lot of really good information over the long term that you can take a lot of information away from. If I had to make a decision quickly on an animal, which I often had to do for various reasons, and we had months and months and months of data, because obviously I love data, and that was also just part of the culture of the org I came from, I would immediately look at behavior observations from staff and the evals, and I could get a pretty good picture from that, not even looking at my immediate team's training notes, etc. So I think those really add up to a fairly solid behavior picture of the animal, as long as that information is recorded somewhere and in standardized language.
Thank you. Raphael, the one thing.
You guys are going to get tired of hearing me say it, but playgroups. I do agree that obviously sharing the information is a key factor, and I think I look at that less as a program and more of a like that is a deal breaker. There has to be some way of recording the information and sharing that information and keeping notes. I do understand though the difference between various shelters, and some are a little more old school paper and pen versus like a program. Um, but I guess if behaviorally speaking, if we're talking about programs leaning into enrichment, playgroups is always going to be my go-to. I'm going to get to know the dog from an individual standpoint with people getting the dog to bring them out. I'm going to see them in a group of their peers or so to see how they do with other dogs. And then through playgroups, I can dictate whether a dog will I guess maybe I shouldn't say dictate, but the dogs that flourish in playgroups, I keep out there as often and as long as possible. It gets them seen. I've had way more adoptions happen from dogs being plucked directly out of playgroups because people can see that dog as an individual versus screaming in their kennel, because that can be tough. But also for the dogs that don't thrive in group, I can set up in the cases of the shelters that I get to go to, I can set up specific programming for that individual. So if they are showing reactivity or they're avoidant, we can build groups specifically around them at a scheduled time to where we can start to hopefully bring them out of their shells, or sometimes just teach them some breaks and some steering, so that we give them the chance to spend more time out there. And the ones that are a no group option, because there are dogs out there that would not do well with other dogs or have not done well with other dogs. For those, then we can find individual programs. A lot of the times the volunteers will jump on it, and those are their walk dogs. Those are the dogs that go on field trips. But if I had to choose one program, it's always going to be playgroups.
Thank you. Kayla?
That was a great tip, Raphael. I think I definitely also love play groups, but I always don't think about the aspect of like letting the public in on that side. I feel very like protective of it. I'm like, no, we'll just watch them do it. We'll take a video for you if you want, but like letting them view it, I have heard that has been successful for a lot of people. So I'm also writing these things down as well. It's also very helpful for me as well. So thank you for sharing all these tips. But for me, I would say having daily communication, even if it's in a very short, concise way. So at our shelter, we recently started implementing daily huddles in the morning. So we had a couple coworkers go to like a disaster relief temporary shelter, and they came back with this this activity where we in the mornings at least one person from every department comes to the front lobby for like 5 to 10 minutes just to check in about how the day is going, how yesterday is going, what are the animals doing, how are they feeling, what are you observing? And there could be one person that kind of takes notes and things like that, but it's just a little quick daily meeting that is accessible for everybody. It's very short, kind of just takes you away for just a second, and everyone has a chance to speak their mind on something that's happening currently or something that they've witnessed but didn't have time to report just yet. So it gives a lot of people an opportunity to kind of just give a general consensus about how everything is going in the organization or with their general population at the time. So just a short little cute meeting in the morning to kind of get your day started, to kind of set you up for the rest of the day, can be super easy to implement and be very, very helpful in terms of getting you kickstarted on communication if you're seeing that you are having a lot of trouble with behavior communication. So if you're not so sure where to start, just start with a little meeting in the mornings to kind of kickstart your day.
Love that. And last but certainly not least, Shonyae, one thing that you think shelters should implement.
For me, it's a very big ask, but volunteer implementation into behavior. A lot of times we hear we don't have resources. There are tons of resources out there in terms of training. Like Raphael mentioned, call up your other shelter that's local and nearby and see if they have a behavior person that you can get some training for. Call up a local trainer in your area, see if they would be willing to donate their time or to give you a better rate as a shelter. Biggest thing is to let volunteers do the great work that they want to do for us. It can really expand your reach. And it oftentimes you can use your volunteers to help with those playgroup social dogs, to help with those dogs that really just want to work on building confidence or leash manners or whatever. And then you can allocate your behavior staff for the dogs that have higher behavior challenges that might need more investment for the behavior team. So really lean into your volunteers and trust your volunteers. Trust them as an extension of yourself.
Love that. So many valuable things that were discussed today, and I'm so sad that it's the end of our session, but there are so many great questions in the chat that we just didn't have the time to address. So I really encourage you to continue this conversation on the forum. Allison will be entering the URL into the chat so that you guys can continue that constructive conversation about behavior. It's such a complicated topic, such a complex, so many levels that we have to go into. But thank you so much to all the panelists today. Maria, Kayla, Shonyae, Raphael, it was great to hear from you. Great to see you. I also want to encourage you guys to check out Camp Maddie. There's a behavior edition. You can earn CE credits from watching that on Maddie's University. So yeah, thank you again. And we hope to see you next week.